One of my subscribers increased his rating with 300 points using the strategy from this video. Another subscriber increased his rating with 455 points, and another subscriber increased his FIDE rating with 200 points. What are they doing? They are using the exact strategy from this video. I will explain step by step, opening, middle game, end game, exactly what you need to do to win more chess games. I will demonstrate a strategy by playing a game against a 2300 rated chessbot. First, we are going to quickly talk about openings before I start the game. So if you use the exact opening, middle game, and end game strategy I teach you, you will massively win games. So please try this out, even if you are not used to these openings. So what do we play with black? We basically pretty much play the exact same thing every single time. If they play pawn to d4, we play pawn d5. Usually they will play pawn c4, and then we play pawn to c6. If they play something else, it doesn't matter, because we basically do the exact same thing every single time with black. If you want to know the exact opening recommendations, in the video description and the pinned comment, I will have a link to an article with the entire strategy and also the opening moves. So we want to always build a pawn triangle, e6, d5, c6, no matter what opening we play with black. No matter what we play against, it's always the same. So let's say they play this, we can develop the knight, and of course we can also push the pawn, but here usually you want to keep open the option always to develop your bishop before pushing the pawn. It depends a little bit on what your opponent plays. Let's say they, for example, play pawn to e3, bishop here, knight out, this. For example, we could have a position like this, and this is exactly what we want to play always. There are also cases, for example, if they play knight to f3 first, where you can choose if you still want to play this, or if you want to solidify the center first. Especially against this opening, against the queen's gambit, there might be issues with the queen hitting your pawn. So that's the very rare case where you want to keep your bishop inside of the pawn chain. Otherwise, against like a London type setup or whatever, you want to get your bishop here. What if they play pawn to c4? We are actually going to do the exact same thing. Here we are going to start with pawn to c6, knight f3, knight c3, and then pawn to d5. So it's the exact same thing. They can play d4 or they can take, which doesn't matter. We play the exact same opening. One of these pawns has moved, but it's still the exact same thing. They will usually play d4, knight here, this, and we don't need to worry about the bishop here since there's always this diagonal as well. So we can just create this pawn triangle. The exact moves don't even matter. We can just develop our pieces and we can castle. So we don't want to really memorize anything. We just want to play the same thing always. Against e4, we are going to do something slightly different. We are going to play d5. And we are going to play the Scandinavian. And you might think, wait, the Scandinavian, is that not a bad opening? No, it's a very good opening. We play this. And the good thing is, eventually, we are basically going to reach this position, which is the exact same. But the d5 pawn has been exchanged. That's the only difference. So that's why we play the Scandinavian. Now, of course, let's go back. Yep. What do we play if we have the white pieces? With the white pieces, I recommend playing the Pegasus system, which is my own opening system, d4, knight to d2. We want to play this, for example, bishop f5 and c4. So with white, we want to play a little bit more aggressive and we want to push the pawn to c4, for example, this, knight f3, something like this. That's the Pegasus system. And then here we have options to develop the bishop like this, to go in with the queen, a bunch of lines that you can play here. If you want to stick to something that's basically always the same, you can also choose, for example, to play the color system. By the way, the Pegasus system also works against this. You can also start with knight f3. But one thing I wanted to say is you can, of course, also play the color system. I'm going to play e6, and this is the color system. Basically the same thing as we play with black, but we just play it with the white pieces, for example, this setup. So that is what we play for the opening. Alright, so this game we are apparently playing against 1d4, so we are going to play d5. They play this, we play c6. The good thing is I don't really have to memorize anything. It's basically the exact same strategy every single time, except here we don't play the bishop out because this could be a little bit annoying, so we just close the pawn triangle. That's one of the exceptions where we keep the bishop inside of the pawn chain. They play this, they attack our knight. We can defend it with the bishop or defend it with the knight. Honestly, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing always. All right, they do capture. Very important, which way do we recapture? We always want to have some benefit from our recapture. So here the benefit is going to be capturing with this pawn, because that opens up our bishop's diagonal. Let me show you. This diagonal is opened up for the bishop. Sometimes if your bishop is already outside of the pawn chain, you can take back here, so you open up something for your rook. So both trades can be good. We usually want to take with a pawn, but both trades can be good. It just depends which one optimizes your position. That's a bit of a strange move. I honestly don't really know why he is playing this. Doesn't matter. We are always going to play the exact same thing. Again, don't really know what he is doing, but we just stick to the opening theory. This also works if your opponent plays something crazy or something I didn't cover in the video or that's not covered in the theory. You can basically always do the exact same thing, just use your logical moves, always play for this same structure. And now we have arrived at the middle game, where I will teach you my middle game strategy. So these work exceptionally well with these specific openings. Alright, so what is our middle game strategy? We have multiple strategy. The first thing we need to do is always CCT. Checks, captures, threats. Very basic, you probably heard about this before. We use this before we use my middle game strategy. So that means in any position we always calculate all checks, all captures and all immediate threats first before we think about anything else. Checks, there are no checks in this position. Captures, there are no captures in this position. So we come to the T of threats. Threats means an immediate attack. Is there a way I can immediately attack something? There actually is. We can potentially attack this bishop by playing knight to h5. So that is potentially a move we can play. Other than that, not really anything going on. I'm not going to play this move because they can just move the bishop and nothing's really happening. Anyways, maybe if this pawn was here, might be a little bit more interesting. So the CCT check is done. Sometimes I'll also add CCTL, L for loose pieces. For example, this is a loose piece, it's unprotected. This is also a loose piece. You can add that in as well. If you don't find anything with CCT, we go to step 2 of the middle game strategy. Step 2 is always to optimize pieces. So in general, I am against pushing pawns. Very important. We want to focus all our energy on improving our pieces. What I'm always looking at is basically which piece is the laziest right now, which one can I improve quite easily. So these have already moved one time, so for now we can let them rest. I also don't really see many ways to optimize, but let me show you. So I am thinking this bishop is pretty bad right now, but it can't do anything. I would probably have to move my knight again, and then we can develop this bishop. This queen doesn't do much right now. We could potentially go here, and we can also attack this pawn, which is weak. And we can also, for example, develop this rook. This rook is completely stuck, of course, because rook b8 is not gonna work. So in this position, I'm always thinking optimizing pieces. I basically want to find my worst pieces, which I think is this bishop, and see if there is a way to improve it. I can't improve the bishop, but I can move my knight. So I'm gonna move my knight. And this way you can always find the best and most simple plan. And we just keep repeating this. All right, now I think the knight has moved, so this bishop could potentially attack this knight. I mean, that's already an improvement from just being here. But before we do that, of course, CCT, checks, captures, threats. Nothing much changed. Loose pieces, this knight looks a little bit loose as well. So we might be attacking it, but it's currently defended. So I'm gonna play my bishop here. They attack. Very important. What do I think about trades? I honestly think every equal trade is fine. So bishops and knights are worth 3 points. Trading them is fine. There are some situations where one piece is better than the other, honestly. But in general, I would say trading them is fine. Trading a rook for a rook is also fine. We want to make sure a rook, in my opinion, is 4.5 points. A bishop and knight is 3 points. So we don't want to trade a rook for a piece. We don't want to trade a rook for a piece and a pawn. But we can trade a rook for 2 pieces or a piece and 2 pawns. The queen is 9 points, so you can trade a queen for 2 rooks or for 3 pieces. So I am gonna tick. That's my general rule. Trading is not bad. This is bad. You don't want to damage your pawn structure like that, but hey, it's my opponent's move. It's not my move. Again, CCT, checks, captures, threats. Don't see anything. The CCTL, the loose piece, this is still loose. We can still attack it. You could play it. It's not really my style, so I'm not gonna do that immediately. Then I'm again looking at optimizing pieces. So these pieces are fine. My queen doesn't have much to do. I feel this is not really an optimizing move. This is a blunder, this as well. So I'm looking at my rooks. Is there a way I can optimize my rooks? For sure, I can optimize my rook like this. Before you do anything, of course, after every move your opponent makes, you want to do a quick blunder check. I usually recommend 10 seconds if you are doing rapid, in which you just think, why did they move this piece? What were they protecting that they are no longer protecting? And what are they attacking? But yeah, it's already defended, plus I can potentially go back with the bishop as well. So no worries. CCT, nothing much has changed. No checks, no captures, and no immediate threats, I think. So again, we want to optimize pieces. Always the same strategy. Also note how we are not talking about moving any pawns. There are some rules for pawns that I have as well. I will explain these now. So in general, I recommend only moving your E, D, and C pawn. You can move these multiple times. So you can set up your triangle in the beginning, but oftentimes there will be a moment where you want to play C5 or E5 basically, and you want to break open the center. Here we already don't have the E pawn anymore, and we are probably never going to push this, or at least not anytime soon. But pushing the pawns here in the center to E5 or C5, or doing something else with your D pawn, like trading for example, is not a bad thing. I think those are fine pawn moves. One exception to my rule is if you see your opponent is threatening to push pawn to b4, for example, let's say they had a pawn here on a3, I always recommend pushing pawn to a5. That's the only exception, the only pawn we can move. We don't move this without a reason. We only move this if there is a clear threat that they want to play pawn to b4, which is not the case here. Just with that being said, we stick to the same principle as always. Optimize the pieces. The knights are fine. The rook has improved, but not really. And the bishop is very passive. So I'm gonna do two things. Improve my rook and also improve my bishop. They are attacking my bishop, okay. Before every move, CCT, checks, captures, threats. That's a capture and a check, and they can recapture with the queen, okay. That's a capture, and as far as I can see, it's also a free pawn. So I'm gonna take this pawn. And you might think, wait, what just happened? Did you just get a free pawn? Yes. And this is exactly what will happen if you use this strategy. If you use this strategy, you can basically not make any mistakes. And your opponent will always be the first to make a mistake. And we're already up a pawn, because of course this is a strong bot. Against a weaker player, you are probably already going to be up a piece, because we are at move 15. So yeah, a lot of the time you're going to be up pieces. They're attacking my knight. There are a couple of things we can do, but again, I am looking at the same thing. CCT, checks, captures, threat. So even a strange capture, for example here, like giving away the rook, that is something we might want to think about, but I don't really see any benefit because it would be attacking my knight. This exchange would in general be bad for us, but we do want to calculate it because we don't want to miss any opportunity to play for a tactic if there might be a tactic. And tactics will always arise from this CCT calculation system. I don't see anything going on with the CCT right now, so we are going to go back to our other strategy, which is optimizing pieces. The knight is fine, it's protected, the rook is somewhat fine. This knight, well, this knight is actually not doing much. It's looking at the squares it can never go to, and it only moved because my bishop would otherwise not be able to develop on this diagonal. So I think it might be interesting just to move the knight again. You could also move the bishop again, you could also move the bishop back. I think there are a bunch of moves, because if you follow this strategy, you basically cannot really make any mistakes. Alright, interesting moment. CCT, checks, captures, threats. So we can capture this, but in a way we are causing some troubles for ourselves, because our knight will be under attack. We have to remaneuver the knight, and you can see that my opponent has some attacking potential. So of course, always calculate. Not every trade is always a good trade, but hey, you can trade. You're not going to lose if you trade here, I think. But I'm not going to trade because I don't want to run into the trouble of moving my knight again. But you could take if you want to. Again, optimize pieces. The bishop, I think, is not really doing much, so I'm going to remaneuver it and slightly optimize it by attacking this knight. Okay, so I do think we might have something going on right here. Again, CCT, checks, captures, threat, so I'm thinking if we capture, and there might be a way for us to attack the queen, but the problem would be that in some line they can capture here. So one variation is CCT, a capture, they recapture, and then I'm looking if there's something going on here, or even attacking it twice with the knight. So if you always use the CCT, the checks, captures, threats, you will eventually find some tactics. So I think the tactic here is exchanging and then attacking it twice. So I think basically he has to go back and defend this. And now, very interesting, again, of course, CCT, I can take, and basically I'm already winning material in this line, which is fine, but I can also, I think, optimize my pieces more and play something like queen a5, because basically we are increasing the pressure here. And now it's just gonna be, yeah, a bloodbath. We can just take this, yes, CCT, so we are gonna do this capture, it's also a check, and I'm even gonna trade queens, because now we have come to the second part of my strategy. Now we are in the endgame, and we are also up material. And if you follow my strategy, you will get this a lot. You will be in endgames and you will be up material. Very simple. The moment we reach the endgame, you have to break our middle game rules. Because now, of course, the rules have changed. It's an endgame. So now we do want to push our pawns. Especially if we can, we want to try and create a passed pawn. That means a pawn that can potentially promote. So the first thing I usually do as soon as we get in the endgame is to start pushing pawns. For example, here we are pushing pawns, we are trading. In general here, since we are up material, which is going to happen a lot of the time, if you are up material, I do recommend trading pieces. Trade as many pieces as you can if they are equal trades, because the endgame will only get easier. So I am going to activate my rook, and I might be able to force a trade here, a trade of rooks basically. It's just an extra trade, and now we are in a rook versus bishop endgame, and this is super easy. The moment you have a very easy endgame, where you are up material, or you're up a pawn, or even if it's equal, if you realize your king is no longer in trouble, because there are no pieces to really attack it, I do recommend to move your king and activate your king. Here, my opponent actually even fell for a little trap. They are, in a way, trapping their own bishop. Because I think we can just play this, attack the bishop, and if they were to try to promote, we still have the rook back. So my opponent even just gave away a free bishop in this variation, and some free pawns as well. And I'm not going to play out this entire endgame, because of course this should be super easy for you, because here we are already winning and we have an extra rook. So if you want to learn a little bit more about this strategy, there are some things I wasn't able to demonstrate. Make sure to check out the link in the description or the top pinned comment, where you will find the entire strategy and also the opening repertoire.